privileged to have the top 2 chapters in the world right here in Texas. Ranked number 2 internationally, the Omicron Psi chapter from Grayson College. Representing this chapter are Mary Linder, our District 2 coordinator and faculty scholar, and Rebecca Foster Gillespie, your District 2 vice president. And Phi Theta Kappa's top chapter is Beta Lambda Mu, Lone Star College Psi Fair. And is represented by Michael Aguilar, your Texas Regional President. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Bo Rollins, Comptroller and Advisor to the Texas Region from Lone Star College Tomball. He has graciously agreed to be our moderator for this session. Please join me in giving them all a warm welcome.
All right, thank you so much. What you should be seeing here shortly is a phone number up on the screen, and what we would like you to do is text to that number your questions, and what those will be displayed on my screen, and so I can then relate those questions to the panelists. So I hope that number is it there? Okay. So what I'm going to ask each of the chapters to do, and I think they've decided who's going to do that, rather than have them refer to what we get on our project, I'm going to give them just a few minutes to describe those projects, so that you can begin then to use those projects to frame your questions. And I wanted to say a couple of things about this. First of all, it is very gracious of you to be doing this. Texas, as you know, is a very competitive region. I know that's maybe news to our visitors from outside of Texas. But part of that competition means that we are also willing to share our secrets to success. In order to have a victory be meaningful, we want to make sure that our opponents are at the top of their games as well. And so we always want to share and help and assist all of our sister chapters across Texas. And so they are setting a great example in doing this, and so I want to thank you again. So I'm not sure where we would like to start, with number 1 or number 2. Okay, well, gotcha. All right, so go ahead and just,
I mean, I have teacher voice, but they
Teacher. Hold on. Are they both on?
Hello. All right, so I'm going to obviously give you a very high-level overview of the project, or we'll be here forever. And I mean, all of us who've done honors in action, you know that to be true. So what we were looking at, what we really got started, okay, hi. What we did with our project is we were looking at the messaging in social movements. Because we know that based on that messaging, people are either drawn to that movement and it mobilizes them, or they stand in opposition to that movement. They have very strong reactions usually. And so we started comparing messaging from social movement to social movement, and we found that it came back to that basic persuasive element of emotion, it's always emotion-based messaging. And so we went beyond the United States and really looked at social movements globally. It's global perspectives. So we were looking all across the globe, and we found that was a common theme all across the world. And so we decided to really delve into this idea in a couple of ways. So one thing that we did is we had a panel on our campus on race relations, particularly looking at some social movements going on, pretty contemporary social movements, Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter, right? We see that out there. And so we had a panel made up of, or comprised of, we had a historian, we had a sociologist, we had a leader in the African American community, and we also had a police officer. And so we had some questions prepared for them and opened it up to the audience to be able to talk about some of these emotional elements in this messaging, and really had some great constructive conversation. And it was wonderful because we wanted this to be the beginning. We don't want it to be a one and done type thing. We want this to be the beginning of conversations in our community, and hopefully we see this happening in other places. So that was one part of our action component. Another thing that we did is we decided, because art is obviously something that drives emotion, is emotionally driven, right? You have reactions to it, either positively or negatively, based on your views. And so we decided it would be a perfect way to kind of demonstrate the emotion in social movements. And so we partnered with our art department on our campus and issued a call for mail art. And we put these on global message boards. And mail art, if you do not know, is postcard-sized art that you create and then send through the postal mail. Snail mail, right? And you send that through. And so we got these from all over the world. Obviously, we had a lot of entries from the United States, but we had some from Bolivia, we had some from Turkey, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Brazil. We just had them from all over Japan. And we put all these up and made a display, and we coupled it actually with our induction. And we had a reception, invited people in so we could talk about these different social movements and the emotions that were used in them. And we're going to be able to take these and hopefully, this is our part that's left undone, donate them to an art gallery in our community so they can be displayed permanently. And there were a lot of really rich conversations about these movements and the use of emotion. And so all of this was tied into Theme 8, Nostalgia and Pathos, because we kept seeing these elements in all of these movements. So it was something that we were very intentional about, and always maintaining that global focus in what we were doing. Because Susan Edwards talked about it, and hopefully you're talking about this in your seminar groups. It is not enough to just look right here in our own little corner of the world. It is important that you look globally, because that's really going to explain to us better about how the world works. And so that's something you need to be very intentional about. It's something we always kept in our minds.
I have a quick question for everyone. How many of y'all would say that in high school or below, y'all were kind of mischievous and you were the troublemaker in y'all's classroom? I know I was for sure one of the troublemakers. Yeah, I saw a lot of hands raised. Not everybody wanted to raise it. But let me follow that question up. Do y'all think that behavior defined who you are or who you will turn out to be? No. So this is kind of where our project was inspired from. It actually started with a TED Talk that I had watched, and it was a prosecuting attorney, and he was talking about how he mainly focused on juvenile crime, and this prosecuting attorney, instead of having punitive discipline for the people that he had to prosecute, like instead of trying to give a kid a maximum sentence, he would do some type of alternative for punishment, or not even really a punishment, whether it's community service or it's partnering up to somebody to be their mentor. It was things like that, and he found that a lot of these people found some value and it boosted their self-esteem. And a lot of these people were able to turn their lives around. And so it took, instead of these kids actually, getting a criminal record and most likely leading down more further bad path, the prosecuting attorney actually was an intervention instead of sending them straight to jail. And this was actually very personal to me because in high school, I went to what our high schools had disciplinary alternative learning centers. And what those are is basically if you are bad enough in high school, they kick you out of your high school and move you to a separate one with other bad kids. And I don't know if you already know that if you put bad kids together, they're not going to learn how to be good. They're going to teach each other to be even worse. But I had went to these and so when I came to my chapter and we were discussing what we were going to want to do for our project, we didn't actually have a theme selected yet. We all decided that the best way to handle it was talking about what we were passionate about and what was going on in the world that we can make a difference in, or in our own community. And I presented this to my chapter, and there was actually another student, another officer that had the same story. He went to one of these ALCs, and we were both here in Phi Theta Kappa. We had GPA, we had high GPAs, we were officers. We weren't, none of us were doing anything bad. Like, we had our lives turned around. And what we found was that both of us had someone in our lives or something that told us that we could be better when we were in high school. And I think that made the difference for us, and that's really what sparked it, the inspiration for our project. So with that being said, we started coming up with questions, and we thought rights and responsibilities. And the question we were really asking is, what is our responsibility for, I guess, disciplining, like how should we be disciplining students? Or does the bad behavior of a student, should that affect their quality of education? And so we started researching this. We looked at the criminal justice system in America. We looked at the school to prison pipeline. We also started looking at psychology studies based on discipline, on the effects of discipline, whether it's positive or negative, positive punishment or negative punishment. So from that research, we came up with our projects, and we wanted to do two things. We wanted to inform people of the issue, and we also wanted to make a difference. So it was kind of like a dual project. The project where we were actually in our community was, we set up a mentorship program with one of these ALCs, and it was actually the ALC that I went to. And we set up meetings with the principal, and they were actually, we actually thought that they wouldn't want us to be a part of their, or a part of their school, but they were actually excited for us to come. The principal there really wanted to really felt like she was there to help students. She wanted them to turn their lives around, to see that there is value in getting an education. And unfortunately, the school didn't have enough funding like a normal high school would to provide that education. When we first went there, we saw that a lot of these kids didn't even have, they were recycling paper, they had old textbooks, they didn't use any computers, and a lot of the teaching was like watching movies. They were watching a lot of movies. They weren't really actually engaging any topics, and there weren't enough teachers there to teach all of the subjects that were in normal high schools. I think they only had like math, history, and social studies, I think. And so we created a system working with the administration of that campus, and what we did was we set up kind of like a spreadsheet where all of our members and our officers could volunteer their time whenever they could to come to this mentorship program. And we did several things. One, there were several times in the week where we would have like a project, and we would come there and we would talk about maybe Lone Star's, the resources that they have at Lone Star so they can continue their education. We also worked with their teachers with any type of activity they were doing. One week we had a drug awareness program, and we were there and actually provided kind of like it was almost like a big brother, big sibling type thing. We were there talking to them about that. And at first they were a little bit shy, they didn't want to speak to us too much, but when we got to sit down and after several weeks, they really wanted to open up and they wanted to know more about it. And the biggest thing that we wanted to do while there was make an impact into one of these kids' life, to see that they are, the place that they're in right now doesn't define who they are, and getting an education can move them further in a better place in life. And like me personally talking to those students, I was able to relate to them when I said, I was in your shoes, and I'm here now. Like, it's possible. Like, you don't see, even if you think that college is expensive or there's something that you can't do, like, it's possible. And then the other project that we did was kind of like a panel as well. We set up a panel in our community college, and we asked the sheriff from Houston, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez. We asked the principal of that ALC to come, And we also asked a lawyer from TSU to come as well. And that lawyer was actually a prominent leader in African American communities. And so we moderated a lot of questions, and we kind of engaged the topic of the school to prison pipeline. And we discussed it, and we had different ideas, or different people representing different backgrounds on that panel. And we were actually able to share something, and the theme, and although everyone was on had a different background, the main thing that everybody wanted to do is to help these students, get their education. And that was basically most of our project right there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone now has some broad background into what their specific projects were. So what we're going to try to do is take the questions and sort them into, we'll move from the very practical questions into the more theoretical or structural questions. So first of all, we have a question. How many members in your chapter worked on the research portion of the Honors in Action project? And related to that, how did you negotiate workloads and conflicts within those teams?
Well, the answer to your first question is as many as possible.
So in your case, how many? How many specifically worked on your project?
About 7.
Okay.
About 7.
Research, the research.
Yes, the research portion.
Okay.
And what we would do is, like he had said, we research our passion. So that's 7 different minds going 7 different ways. And then we come together, discuss what we had found, and then decided which way do we want to go. And then once we do that, then we ask more questions. And then we divide that up between the 7 that we have. And then back to the research. So then we each have a section or a question or an idea to research. And then we would come back and we would discuss it again and see what are we missing? Are we missing the global perspective? That's it.
Everyone in our chapter was responsible for the research part. Or not everyone, but every officer was there to engage in that research. It first started off as, we were researching our passion, and then once we selected what we wanted to, what type of Honors in Action project, or what direction we wanted to take that project, everyone was there as well to look in different perspectives and things that interested them, but also related to the topic.
I always have something to add. To the part of the question about the workload, right? Because everybody's busy, and so you are adding some significant research on top of your already busy schedule. One thing we do in our chapter is we try to do as much of our research as possible by the end of summer. That's something we're very committed to. We do early discussions in the spring, really try to narrow down on themes and things like that. But then we are research heavy in the summer, because that's usually, even though you may be taking some summer classes, usually you have a lighter load, a bit more flexibility as compared to spring and fall. And so that's something we push very hard in our chapter. Sometimes our teams take our advice. Advisors are sitting there saying, trust us, you want to get this done in the summer, because when fall comes, life is going to suck. Because you're going to have to keep up your grades and still finish this project if you want to be a 5-star chapter. And sometimes they take our advice and sometimes they don't. And then they realize, hey, y'all were right. But that's really what we do, is we give that advice and really push our teams in the summer. We meet weekly in the summer working on Honors in Action, and really trying to get that research knocked out as best we can, so that it's not an additional burden when fall comes around.
Okay. Another question, what other campus resources did you access or use, or in what ways did other people on your campus assist you in this?
So the biggest contribution that we got from our campus was the English department for Hallmark writing. The Hallmark writing is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, part of turning in your HIA project. your scores are based solely on what you write, not on anything else. So what we did was we created several drafts and we submitted them through several professors through the English department, and they reviewed and revised and edited and red marks all over it. We had to, we basically memorized our hallmarks because we knew them so well when we were editing. Yeah.
And these professors didn't know anything about the project. They're just
No.
working with you strictly on the.
And that was good too, because they brought an outside perspective. They were able to say, what do you mean by this? Like, we were in the research, so we know the jargon of what our topic was about. And a professor in the English department is going to tell you, hey, this is kind of unclear, or you need to be a little more clear, or this is too wordy, and every little detail like that. And a lot of these things that you don't pick up, you think it's perfect, but there's always something that can be improved upon. And, yeah.
Like him, we worked with our English department, and for the same reasons, she can come in and say, I have no idea what is going on here, and we know that we have a lot of work to do. For this specific project, we also worked with our art department in order to use his networking to get the mail art to come in. And yeah, he put the displays together at the exhibit when they did for the induction. Of course, our administration. We always work with our administration. They, as much as possible. Missing anybody? Those are the big ones. Yeah.
I think this one must be from Susan Edwards. Did you use it's not. Did you use any of the research suggested in the honors program guide for your projects?
Well, I will say that we did not, but we have in the past. A lot of times people don't use that honors program guide for the valuable tool that it really is. That honors program guide is wonderful, and I especially love it when you're talking about new people coming in and have no idea what honors in action is. Because they're walking in not only through those themes, they have a sample project in there for you to get information from, but they do provide you some wonderful resources. And so you can use those, especially when you're doing that early exploring of that particular theme, to get you thinking about it. You may not use that in your final product, but they want you to think about these, the topic overall, right? How the world works, global perspectives. And then within the additional things, they want you to think about that very broadly, and then you're narrowing down. And those sources can help you do that.
I use the honor study guide every time, and most of it is just going back and reading and playing different perspectives in my mind.
I didn't use any particular source from the honor study guide, but my advisor, Blake Ellis, did point out to me something about the kind of sources that they had on the honor study guide. And it was basically that they're not all scholarly articles. The point I'm trying to make is you want to use resources that are like a diverse amount of resources, whether it's interviews or primary sources and different types of things. Or one of our resources was actually the panel discussion that we had with these experts and that had some type of opinion to have on a subject.
And I believe Blake Ellis has actually written an article about that project, which you can access on the Reach blog. So look into that. Okay, well, related to that, where is that? Very good question. Especially for broad topics, there can be virtually limitless amounts of research that can be done. At what point do you know you're ready to take the leap from research to planning your serve and act component? And how did you narrow down your sources to the limit that's been given?
To answer your first question, it's definitely the funnel. So the real broad, go out and, each person do their own passion, and then come back and then narrow it down a little more, and then research some more, then come and discuss, narrow it down some more, and then maybe get an outside view. And then really the project comes from the research. Never have I said, oh, we want to do this project. It's always been a need in our community or in our world, and it's literally just popped out at us from the research. And narrowing down the sources, it's hard. We think of the process. How did we get there? The overall. And then what sources got us there is kind of how, because it's only 8, it's not a lot. And then we always annotate the sources so we can remember, this is what we learned from this one, and this is where we were going with it.
So on the sources, exactly like Rebecca said, is that it needs to explain your process. So what we do, we're very, again, intentional about, is we want to be able to see our story from when we started our first broad research down to ultimately what led us to our action component. We need to be able to see that story in those 8 sources. And so we're doing all this research on different parts of this project. And so if it's like the broad stuff, what was the #1 source, the best academic source that we can find from what we did here in this section. And so that's what we do. We just find that best source from each stage of our project.
To answer the question of how we knew we were ready, we also had a deadline that we wanted to have our entire research done by the end of the summer. How we knew we were ready was we thought of it as if it was like a research project that we were doing for a class. And we were presenting it to our members, and they were the ones that were going to give us feedback on it. So that was really the biggest thing, because it gave us, it was almost like presenting in front of your teacher, and it was just as intimidating. But at the same time, that was the most valuable thing, because our research was actually able to be a lot more well-rounded. We presented it as if it was a research project. And I think that built that foundation for us to move forward with our action.
You might have noted 2 out of 2 top chapters said, finish your research before the end of the summer.
Yeah, you definitely, if you think you can, remember that you have classes where you actually do your own research with other stuff. So it's going to be a lot harder to try to do it when you have classes going on.
Okay, related, and you've addressed part of this, but they say not to start with the action whenever choosing a topic. What advice can you give to avoid committing that mistake? And how long did it take you to actually choose your theme?
So every year it's a little bit different. Every team approaches the project in a different way. Some want to come in and really be theme focused and say, we're going to find questions within each individual theme. And so they'll start with the theme and do it that way. Others, it starts from a conversation, kind of like what Michael was talking about, what interests us. And then we figure out the theme later, where does it best fit in this topic? So every team is a little bit different in that respect. And we really try to respect the natural progression of each team, because it's their project and it needs to be their passion. And so, sometimes, when you have veterans who've done it one way and they come in the next year and the team's doing it another way, they're like, I don't understand what's happening. So sometimes there's a learning curve for all of us in that way. But what was the other part of the question?
How long did it take you to choose?
How long did it take you to choose? That also differs team to team, but really, and this is, I think it's hard for high achieving students who always want to have that answer. So you kind of come in and like, I want to know what my project's going to be. That's not the way research is supposed to be. You're not supposed to go into it with an agenda. You need to follow truly follow the research. And sometimes that can be a little frustrating and you feel kind of you're lost in the weeds a little bit. But honestly, if you just keep asking those questions and you're narrowing down, the answer will be apparent to you. So there's not a set time frame, at least hasn't been in my experience. It's just where the research takes you, and it'll be very apparent. When we were looking at the art and we were looking at the emotion in it, we had been looking at all this emotion-based messaging in all of these groups, and then in one of our conversations, we started talking about art and how emotional art is, and then we're like, well, hang on. And so that's how it happened. It comes from those conversations. You have to let that research and let the true research process happen. Quit trying to have the automatic answer. You've got to get out of your own way in that respect.
I'm going to answer about the cart before the horse thing. Self-awareness, and somebody to say, hey, you're going too fast, you're putting this before that. So either self-awareness or somebody to make you aware that that's what you're doing.
It basically answered the same way I would have. Is you don't want to pick your theme first. You want to get the research on what you want to do, and then once you have your research and you're reading through it, it'll be clear what your project is going to direct you towards. And we were doing the school to prison pipeline, and it was easy to tell that rights and responsibility. It was through the questions of like what kind of questions were we asking in our research. And that really kind of points you in the direction of where your theme might lay.
Moving slightly towards the action portion, what type of leadership training did you have to facilitate the action process for a portion of your project?
So this is one of the things that also was with the question of who we collaborated with. We collaborated with a lot of speech teachers before we actually went to this mentorship program, because we didn't want to send people into a school and have no idea what to talk about or how they should phrase the way they speak to the students.
With this particular project, because we did a panel, we needed to provide some training to our moderator for how to do an introduction, how to present yourself, how to control sometimes an audience that can get a little unruly, particularly when you're talking about sensitive subject matter. And so we were able to use our resources. My co-advisor is a very gifted communications professor, and so she was able to use her skills and provide that training. And so with respect to the art, we had to obviously learn how to construct that global posting, right, that call for mail art. We had to learn how to help put together the displays, the best way to display, how to sort through those pieces of mail and preserve them, and things like that. So there were different leadership elements in that way.
How many students, this is addressing the impact of your program, how many students spoke about their lives being changed, or people spoke about their lives being changed through the process?
I don't know that I can say a certain number, but one thing that we do is we talk to people after we have our event. So after the panel, we talk to people at the mail art presentation, we talk to people, and we get that feedback, and we get something great, we write that down because we want to include that quote in our submission. But don't just talk to your people off the street type of attendees. Talk to your officers, your members as well, because you want to capture how this has changed them through this process as well. And so what I did after the panel is I sent out a question to our members, our officer team, and asked them to provide a reflection on what they learned through that process. And so we had all that good stuff. We did it right after, so it was fresh. You don't want to be trying to remember how you were moved 4 months later. And so we just kept these as part of our journaling. We kept these, and that way we could go back and reference them and incorporate that into our outcomes, because that's good qualitative stuff for your outcomes.
She stole my answer.
For us, it was actually difficult for two reasons to kind of collect the data of how much of an impact we made on our students' lives. One is because it's a public school, and there's a privacy issue where we can't, keep too much of a connection with the students. But also is that these alternative learning centers, the students that went there, they would cycle out. They would be there for 30 to 60 days, and once during the time we were there for 2 months, and we often didn't see the same kids there. It would be every week, we would get a new set of kids coming in, and the other ones leaving. But we based it off of personal experience. Like, we would go there, and I had several kids that were excited to see me, and other members. They made their own connections with different people in different classes, and with the panel, we collected a survey at the end of it that asked that asked our audience how much they took away from it, and how effective the questions were being asked, and that just kind of gave us that was just for us, for our development, to see where we're doing at, where we could be a little better at, and it was just for our personal development.
How would you recommend a chapter make its project stand out from all the rest? Or did you think about that explicitly as you framed your projects?
We didn't look at it as we want to have like some type of edge. We looked at it as how can we be innovative, and how can we affect the most people, or we had to answer the question of do we want to impact a large amount of people, or do we want to impact a small amount of people effectively or significantly? And we chose that we wanted to impact a small amount of people as effective as we could.
I'm with Michael. I don't think that we wrote the Hallmarks to stand out or stick out in some way. I think when the research is done well, the action component is done well, and you use the resources when writing, because you can do an absolutely amazing project, and if the writing is subpar, it's not going to score well, and vice versa. You can, do a small project, I say small, but affect a small amount of people, and write it very poorly,
And also challenge yourself. For our project, we wanted to. It came down to either doing our panel or doing the mentorship program. And what we concluded is that we felt that both of these were important, and if we gave an extra effort, we could do both. And normally we came into it just thinking, all right, we're just going to do one project and it'll be it. But no, we took it where we wanted to do the best as we possibly could in that short amount of time.
Very practical question. How would you advise a chapter if they're having trouble getting started with the research by now? What starting point do you recommend? We've got a lot of chapters who are here and just now beginning to think about these questions. How would you start? What would you do?
Well, open up your honors program guide, look through the themes, discuss the themes, discuss what you're passionate about, discuss what you know, and then kick it in the rear and get started.
Yeah, so we try to start in the spring, like I said, with the initial conversations and things like that. So we have a timeline we try to follow. Sometimes we do a better job than others. But if you're sitting here thinking, well, we haven't even really gotten that far, so I guess all hope is lost, that is not the case. You can dig in and still have an amazing project this year and learn a tremendous amount of things from it. It really does depend on the work you're willing to put into it. That at the end of the day, that's what it is. If you are willing to work hard and knock it out of the park, you can make it happen. Whether you use all 12 months in the calendar year or you use just 4 months. So it's up to you in that respect.
I would just add as well as if you feel like you're falling behind with the schedule that our chapters have, where we want to have the research done first, and then we want to do the action in the first part of the semester. If you're not following that timeline, don't worry. Every chapter is different. Everyone has their own schedules. Maybe not everyone can be as available to do it. And so just remember that the hallmarks are really that's what your project is going to be graded on. So if you can get that, that's something that you really need to make sure that you get done on time. That you can't delay on that. But if the research to get started on that, just start whatever's interesting you. Look through current events, or maybe a book that you really like, and if there's something that sticks out to you, or maybe you're watching TV and then there's something that comes up and it's an idea, and it could always start with something small and it builds up. Like I said, I watched the TED Talk and that just sparked my interest. So go online, just watch videos on YouTube about something that you're interested in, and it'll pick up. Just if you look for it, something will come up.
Perhaps the holy grail of questions in Phi Theta Kappa. How did you motivate your members to work with your project?
We can't answer that, that's illegal. I think the biggest thing is getting started in the spring and trying to get as many people involved, because let's be real, as many as we want to get going, about half usually trail off in the summer. So I think that's kind of where the passion thing comes in. If you get somebody who is passionate about something and they really stick with it, I think that's really all the motivation that they would need.
She was trying to avoid saying I'm a taskmaster. I'm not. But why are y'all nodding? I know. I'm leaving. No. So I really think it comes from the team, and the team is everyone who's involved in the project and the advisors who are involved, right? I think you have to motivate each other, because we're all gonna have those times where we get frustrated, we hit a brick wall. That is natural, that is going to happen. And when you get to that point, you need your team to say, come on, we can do this. So really, it's about playing on that team mindset to keep each other moving forward.
To be honest, I don't have too much of an answer. We were really fortunate enough to have members that really loved the project when we presented to it. When we presented it to them, and the only incentive that we really had was, this is a good opportunity to serve, get volunteer hours, make a difference in someone's lives, and we had a lot of people that really responded to that, and they wanted to come out there, even if they could only come out in one day out of the whole entire mentorship program. That was enough for us to thank them.
Another practical question. Due to high officer turnover, we've had problems starting the research process in the spring and finding that the officers who then take over are uninterested in the topic. How do you deal with this sort of problem?
So I think from an advisor perspective, we remind our team that it's not a personal project. It is not just your project, it's the chapter's project. So I will tell my team, if we've gotten started on something and the new team comes in and they're like, no, we just absolutely do not like that, that's fine. We don't keep things set in stone. But I'm very real with them and say, if you want to switch, that's fine, but here's the timeline. It's going to be X, Y, and Z. The choice is yours. We can continue what we've done because we've got this work that's already been done, Or you can switch, meaning you're gonna have to be willing to kick it into gear and get caught up to this point and still execute the way you wanna execute. So I advise them in that way. I leave the choice with them because they're gonna have to carry this out. But I present that information so that they can then make an informed choice.
Okay, all right. What do you know now that you wish you knew before you started the project?
Journaling. The importance of writing everything down. Everything, even if it's what you searched in the search engine. Write it all down. Why did you search it? Where did it lead you? You know, what did you click on from there? I mean, the whole process. Did you meet with somebody? When did you meet with them? What time did you meet with them? Because when you go back to write it up, this work that you did in the spring and in the summer will come, you know, November, December when you write it up. I don't know about y'all. I know about her. Her memory is great. Mine is not. So I can refer back to that. So journaling, I wish I had taken more care to journal. She preached and preached and preached, but it was a lesson I learned the hard way.
The biggest thing is time management. From the outline I gave you, it does seem like we were very organized with our timeline, but during that fall semester when we were doing our project, I had to balance work and school and Phi Theta Kappa, and being like, I would say I've gotten better at it, and I think a lot of those tools of time management would have been a lot useful back in that time, because it would have saved me a lot of stress.
Okay, well now we've finished the research, we've completed our project or projects. Could you describe specifically your writing process?
So our process is long because we want to, if we've done all this work, we want that to shine in our submission. So we take the submission as seriously as we did the project itself, all the research and the action component. What we do is we form writing teams. And so the writing teams take the lead on putting together the draft of the Hallmark. And so we advisors tell them, okay, so when you have it where you think it's ready to submit, like you're like, this is awesome, I'm good with this, turn it in. Like you would turn it in for a class, bring it to us. And so then we have 3 advisors on this last one. So then all 3 advisors take that draft, and we don't use red is me, but we use our purple pens or pink. And so we give some constructive feedback on the draft, and then we return it to them and say, okay, so now we need you to think about this feedback, incorporate these ideas from the journal, go back to your journals, right? You're missing this part. And so we have them do that. We ask them, even though you have a writing team, talk to your other members, right, who were involved in it, get their information and their input, get us a new draft, come back, guess what we do again, right? So we go through a few rounds of this until, as advisors, we feel that it's in a good place. And then once we think it's in a good place, that's when we send it to our English faculty. And we have a wonderful faculty member who really gets it when it comes to honors and action. She knows the rubric well because she's done this for us for several years, but she's not at all been involved in the project, so she's looking at it with fresh eyes. And so then she goes through there, and not only is she fixing the grammatical things, but she's giving us that important feedback of, I don't understand how you got from point A to point B. And so she's bringing those things to light so that we can send it back to the students, get that fixed, and really have something that's ready to submit.
When do they submit the first draft to you?
So
Calendar date.
The actual date, the actual
Yes.
date itself varies, but when they have to have to us their draft in early December, so that we have time to send it through these rounds of edits. we're very mindful of that January deadline. And we do want them to have some holiday as well. So we tell them, stick to these deadlines, and that way you'll get to enjoy some holiday. You don't stick to the deadlines, well, you made a choice. I'm being real with y'all.
Our process was very similar. The things I would add though is that we wanted to have at least a rough draft done before the winter break started. That way it stops, I guess, like procrastination, because once you're in winter break and you haven't started anything, you're not going to want to start anything until like you come back. And to make that simpler on you, use your officer team. We didn't break up like specific people to, these are going to be the only people writing Hallmarks, because we wanted to make sure that as an entire chapter, we did our absolute best to make the project as best, to make the writing as best as we could, the action project as best as we could, and the research aspect as best as we could. So we split all the Hallmarks between us, and we all took like 2 or 3, and you could get at least a rough draft done before then, and then that's when you're able to have that time to submit to people, to reach out to your English department or reach out to people who you can help, who can help you, and you have that also coming back in that break. You still have a couple weeks before that January deadline hits to just revise and revise and revise and revise.
Okay, now this question has come up a number of times. What are your top 3 tips or tricks or insights, depending on who submitted the question, as it relates to this project? 3 of the most important things toward a successful project.
Planning is number 1. I think the planning is going to make things run a lot smoother, efficient planning. Second is hard work, a lot of hard work and motivation. And third is to have that passion, because if you don't have that passion, then you're not going to want to keep going for, it's months that you're going to be working with this project. So you want to be something that you're really passionate about and interested in, and something that you can do within your own community.
I would say 1 is to focus on the process. The process is where your learning is happening, and that's what they want to see evidence of in your submission. And so sometimes, and usually this will happen, you're going to run into some type of roadblock or something in your Hallmark or in your whole honors and action process. Don't be afraid to include that, because learning is coming from that. So that process is so important. Second is journaling, as Rebecca talked about. The journaling is essential. You may think that you have the best memory in the world, but a lot of life is going to happen between when you're doing your research and having conversations about it and when you actually write up that submission. And so you want to be able to refer back to those journals. And then the third tip I have is to start that submission early. If you really want to do well, then you're going to need to start it early enough, because you need to be able to write it and set it aside and come back to it. The things you're learning in your English classes about how to put together a good essay, you can apply that information here. Okay, it's important, because you're going to be looking at it with fresher eyes, and you're saying, oh, I forgot to mention this, or I didn't make a good connection here, and then obviously sending it through all the editors, you need time for that. If you try to just bust it out at the end, you may think that you're a rock star and can do that, and maybe you can, and more power to you, but the odds are not on your side in that respect. And so start early. It's very important.
My takeaway there, the secret to success in life is the annotated bibliography.
Absolutely.
All right. One final question. We thank you for your time. One final question. How does it feel after all the hard work to place at the top of Phi Theta Kappa?
Well, I have to say that when I was voluntold that we were doing this panel by this one, so no, I really am thankful for this opportunity. But I said that I was gonna come up here and say, guys, I have no idea how it happened. And in many ways, that is true. I can tell you my co-advisor says she's never gonna sit next to me again at a Hallmarks award gala because I kept sitting there going, we're not gonna win. We're not gonna win anything. Oh my gosh. And so having little mini panic attacks. Because I knew that our officers had done such a good job, and so I did have a lot of confidence in it, but you never know, we're all competing against the best of the best. And so I was having those little panic attacks. I'll tell you, it still doesn't feel real. Headquarters very kindly sent us the awards envelope from our first finalists when we were announced on stage. And I got it in the mail last week, and I can tell you I teared up at it. It still hasn't hit me. I don't know if it ever will that the team was able to accomplish this. I'm unbelievably proud of our team. I really am, and it may never happen again. If it does, that's great. If it doesn't, our students are going to keep trying and keep learning, and that's what we're going to focus on. We don't set our goal to be number 1, number 2, top 10, anything like that. We set our goal to do the best we can every single year. That's a realistic goal. That's something we can shoot for, and if we win awards on it, that's wonderful. But we never set our goal as we want to win something.
I was just in trance. Oh, yeah. How does it feel?
Unreal.
I don't know, I feel like I want to take that success and not just bring it to the chapter, but be able to bring it to the region, be able to do things like this, to share what we have learned through our process and give tips and really just give back.
For me, personally, of course, it felt amazing when we went up there and we were called for number 1. We were extreme. I felt it was very much uplifting for your self-esteem, and especially all that hard work paying off. But the biggest thing for me was seeing how much it meant for my advisor Blake Ellis. I guess our chapter history with him coming up as our advisor. He started it. He came into our chapter 3 years ago. We weren't 5-star. It was almost starting with a new chapter, and that amount of time he's worked with students, and not only to better the chapter, but to provide opportunities for those students to move out and to chase their dreams and be able to have the opportunity to do that. And seeing him, I guess, reach the pinnacle, starting, and then, the first year we're not recognized. Well, I think we're only recognized at the regional level, and then the year after that we're moving forward. We're recognized internationally, and then the year that just passed, and moving us up all the way to the number 1. I think that's the greatest victory, or the way that I felt we could give back to all that he's done for us as students, and yeah.